You're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back, everybody. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associate Studios is 4:16. Big three-game series locally, Mets and Phillies coming up starting tomorrow at 7:05. First pitch at Citizens Bank Ballpark. It will be Hellickson up against the All-Star in Big Sexy, Bartolo Colon. And now joining us on the hotline to talk a little Mets baseball and some Phillies. Also a big documentary tonight, the 30 for 30 on Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, is ESPN's very own Adam Rubin. Adam, Zach Gelb, thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I was reading your Twitter bio today, and I follow you on Twitter all the time, and I've been a loyal follower for many years, but I never realized that you went to Wharton, the school in Penn. So you must be one smart guy, Adam Rubin.
I don't know how smart I was to go into journalism, but it was a good time to be at Penn. The early 90s, Matt Maloney and Jerome Allen were the backcourt. Kind of wrested away from Princeton, the Ivy League title there for several years. We lost to Columbia my freshman year, and then the Allen and Maloney-led team won 43 straight Ivy League games the rest of the time I was there. So certainly a good time to be at Penn if you're interested in basketball.
There's nothing like a Big Five game at the Palestra, Adam.
No, and I had my senior year, I had front row seats right at midcourt, so you could basically you're on top of the players. You could basically stick out your leg and trip somebody, and it's like an echo chamber in there. And I know, hopefully now with Steve Donahue there, starting to get revived a little bit. I know there's been a down period since Fran Dunphy left, but it was an incredible time to be at Penn. The gym was absolutely packed all the time, especially for those Penn Princeton games back when I was there.
Before we talk some baseball, where'd you get your cheesesteak when you were living in Philadelphia?
You know what? I hate to confess, I'm not a big cheesesteak person.
Oh, no.
I actually did chicken steaks more frequently, by the way.
Well, I started to like you up until that point as we're talking to Adam Rubin from ESPN. So the big 30 for 30 is tonight. After you take a look back at all these years, what stands out to you about Doc and Darryl?
Well, I mean, I know the frustration for Met fans is that there was only one championship in '86 because the team as talented as it was obviously had off-the-field issues and got dismantled and players combusted. And obviously Doc and Darryl epitomized that. They're still around the team a fair amount as ambassadors. And Judd Apatow is the one who directed this 30 for 30, and he's phenomenal. So I'm sure it's going to – I've seen a little bit of trailers and stuff, but I'm sure it's going to be absolutely phenomenal tonight at 9 o'clock, I believe it is.
What is their relationship like between the two of them? Because obviously they were both enormous names in New York, but do they still talk to this day? Obviously they do the 30 for 30, so we'll bring them closer together. But what's their interactions like on a daily basis?
You know what? I heard in one of the interviews with I think it was with Judd Apatow that those guys until ESPN brought them together for this documentary hadn't actually just sat down in a room and talked since forever. So I know they've been around the same events the Mets had, for instance, earlier this year in '86 celebration to honor the 30th anniversary of that team. So I know they've been in the same place at the same time, but I don't know how close they've been in recent years.
Yeah, and you're right, because everyone wonders, and I grew up as a Mets fan. I wasn't alive for '86, but you get one World Series, but fans, even in that Dykstra book, which I'm not a big fan of Lenny Dykstra, but you hear that he went after Davey Johnson and critical, and you really do think that Mets team should have won more than one World Series, so it's hard not to bring that up when you talk about those two iconic names and Doc and Darryl. But also, one thing that every Mets fan knows is that Doc Gooden, he had trouble making it to that parade, and I'm sure they're going to touch on that in the 30 for 30 tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, drugs were a big part of that '86 team, and Doc, because well, I shouldn't laugh; it's not funny, but because of his celebration, let's say after the World Series title, I kind of missed the celebratory parade. It's not funny. I shouldn't even chuckle at it.
We're talking to Adam Rubin, who joins us right now from ESPN. So Colon and Familia, they both make the All-Star game. We knew we weren't going to see Cespedes or Syndergaard, but they didn't get into the All-Star game. Is there any frustration carryover from the end of that All-Star game?
Well, Terry Collins, the Mets manager, basically said that he only wanted to use Familia in a safe situation. Otherwise, he wanted to rest him. Now, I know Familia initially balked at talking to reporters after the game, so I think he must have been, at least in the moment, stung by not getting into the game. He did say the right things when he eventually talked to the media. Colon, the understanding was he was kind of a late selection. He was just kind of a safety net, and I think happy to be there. He was going to pitch in extra innings, kind of finish the game if it went to extra innings. So there was no disaster where they ran out of pitching. He just would have went as long as he went, and obviously Terry thinks highly of him for selecting him to the All-Star game, and 2, he's going to start the second half opener, which is partly out of necessity, but partly out of a recognition that Cologne did phenomenally well during the first half. His last start of the first half kind of hurt his ERA. It's up to 3.28 now, but Bartolo Colon for the bulk of the first half was maybe the Mets MVP other than Syndergaard from a pitching perspective.
Have you ever covered an athlete more interesting than Bartolo Colon?
Well, I mean, certainly there's from the hitting and the home run earlier this year in San Diego to just pitching at age 43. I mean, and the body type. I mean, it's a phenomenal athlete despite the body type, but you wrap all those things together, and certainly it's an incredible storyline. And obviously, there are different issues too swirling around from getting suspended once for PEDs, and I mean, there was a report earlier this year. I stay away from the off the field stuff for the most part, but there was obviously a lawsuit earlier this year from a second family trying to get child support. So I mean, he certainly is interesting both on and off the field.
Yeah, no doubt about that, as I was able to be there in the Mets clubhouse for that Cubs-Mets game a few weeks ago when it was Arrieta up against Bartolo Colon, as we're talking to Adam Rubin from ESPN. So Terry Collin nationally got some backlash the way that he handled the All-Star game. We talked about Colon and Familia not getting into the game. You saw what Pete Rose had to say after the All-Star game, but I don't really knock Terry for the way that he managed the All-Star game. I just think it's more of a flaw in the rule that home field gets decided by the winner of the All-Star game, and All-Star games should be fun. You should try to get everyone in, and I would just like to see the team that had the best record get the home field for the World Series. What are your thoughts on everything that's going on with the backlash with Terry Collins from the All-Star game and the rules of the All-Star game?
Well, I'm not a big fan of it determining home field advantage. Best record is obviously the fairest way to do it, even though the teams obviously face different schedules, but Major League Baseball doesn't want to do that because they believe that, unlike the Super Bowl where you know the venue a few years ahead of time, they want to at least know whether the team is going to be start on the home or on the road, so for hotel arrangements and things like that, because it's a lot more difficult if there's it could come down conceivably to 2 days beforehand. You wouldn't know which team would have home field advantage, so they don't feel like that is practical. So, I mean, the alternating thing wasn't perfect either, but I didn't have a problem with the way they formally did it. I think people, the carrot of it meaning something supposedly because of home field advantage obviously hasn't helped the ratings. I think I read the ratings were at the lowest point for several years. It was down double-digit percentage-wise. So clearly it's not resonating with fans as much anymore.
And in the All-Star game, Murphy had a nice play with the glove, and we know how much Murphy has killed the Mets this year. When you take a look back at that decision for the Mets to allow Murphy to go to Washington, do you think at all the Mets regret that decision?
Well, I mean, in retrospect, it's easy to criticize it. I don't know how much they're kicking themselves now. The Mets financially didn't want to make that commitment. They would have done a one-year deal. They did make a qualifying offer for 1 year, $15.8 million. Clearly, it was the wrong decision to let him go, especially since he only got 3 years, $37.5 million. But the Mets are going to have to tie up so much money in pitching going forward that I think they didn't want to tie up too much in a second baseman, because they do have Dilson Herrera sitting at AAA, who should succeed Neil Walker next year as the second baseman. Early on, when Walker hit 9 home runs in April, even though Murphy was hitting 400 at the time, it didn't look like a terrible decision because Walker was producing also. But Walker's really come down to earth since April. I think he's hitting about 220 since May 1st or so. So clearly, in retrospect, poor decision to let Daniel Murphy go. But there were some economic reasons, if nothing else, behind it. They also didn't think that he was going to sustain the home runs the way he has. Kevin Long, the Mets hitting coach, made some adjustments with Murphy last year, and obviously it translated to an incredible postseason, record-setting postseason with the homers and 6 straight games. But I don't think they thought it was going to be sustained at this level, that kind of power, and it has what's made them look bad.
And fans also have to remember at the time they were still trying to get back Cespedes, and they were able to get back Cespedes, and we know the Mets' financial problems. By the way, since I bring up Cespedes, what's the latest on Cespedes' health and also Noah Syndergaard's?
Well, in Cespedes' case, he has a strained right quadriceps. He had to leave the game last Friday. They did not put him on the disabled list. The hope is that he's available tomorrow for the series opener, but until everyone gets to the ballpark and the Mets people could check on him, it's not clear whether he's going to be available. In Noah Syndergaard's case, he left his last start. His fastball velocity dipped to 91 in his last inning, and they called it tired arm. They didn't take an MRI or anything like that. We'll see. They're giving him the maximum rest possible by waiting until the fifth start after the All-Star break in order to use him. But well, the proof, I guess, will be in the pudding Tuesday if he performs or whether he has a problem. It's he says it was just fatigue from pitching so much in the first half, but it won't really be clear until he gets back on the mound and shows that 100-mile-an-hour fastball again.
You know, it's funny because everyone talks about the Mets lineup and everyone was banking on the starting pitching, and we know that Harvey went down and he's going to be done for the season. And then there are those concerns about Noah Syndergaard and also Steven Matz, and now looks like the Mets are in a position where they may now need to go get a starter before the end of the deadline or get a reliever to go help this bullpen and also the starting rotation. And I guess the addition of Jose Reyes has taken some of the pressure off this Mets offense. But really, from now into the deadline, I think this team needs to go on out there and acquire a starting pitcher and also a reliever, Adam.
Well, if they're going to acquire somebody, a reliever, I'm told, is more likely than a starting pitcher, although they're not dismissing acquiring a starting pitcher. Logan Verrett is going to pitch against the Phillies on Saturday. That's the Matt Harvey slot. It'll be a second time in the rotation in Harvey's turn. It would really, really help the Mets if he could perform well there, and that'll lessen the need to go out and get somebody. If he falters there, particularly badly, I think they're prepared next to try out one of their guys in the minors, whether that's Sean Gilmartin, who we've seen at the major league level before, or Gabriel Noah, a right-hander who just was in the AAA All-Star game. So we'll see where that goes. They have Zach Wheeler, who hasn't started a rehab assignment yet. He's had a couple setbacks and coming back from Tommy John surgery. Late August is probably the best case scenario now for Wheeler. So the more likely scenario is the kind of the Mets buy their time with either Verrett or someone from the minor leagues until Wheeler's back and don't make a trade for starting pitcher. But they're certainly going to investigate who's available and see where it goes, including, I wouldn't predict a trade in division with the Phillies for Jeremy Hellickson, but certainly he's going to be pitching on Friday opposite Cologne, and he's one guy who very well could get moved at the trade deadline. Wouldn't shock me at all.
I'll tell you about the Phillies. Things look like they were going to go south in June. They weren't playing well, but ever since Maikel Franco got plunked by Johnny Cueto, they've been a different team, and Pete Mackanin has done a nice job. I know the Mets recently have played well against the Phillies in Citizens Bank Ballpark especially, but I've been surprised this year by the Phillies. Adam, how about yourself?
No, most definitely, and the Mets have had a little difficulty, even though they've had success in the past at Citizens Bank Park. A lot of the games against the Phillies this year were early, and the Mets are 3-3 only against the Phillies this year after really beating up on them last year. The Phillies really depressed Met fans. It was the first home series of the year for the Mets when they came to Citi Field and took 2 out of 3. The Mets answered in Philadelphia by winning a week later 2 out of 3. But the Mets haven't seen the Phillies since mid-April, so it's been a while, and certainly be interesting. The Mets last year really beat up on the lesser teams in the division in terms of the Braves and the Phillies and the Marlins, and helped them win the division. They haven't done that so far this year. They're 3-3 against the Phillies, and what are they? I had it in front of me. 5-4 against the Marlins, and only 7-6 against the Braves, and couple that with being 4-9 against the Nationals, and that's why they are where they are, 6 games back in the division right now.
So now, before we let you run, as we're talking to Adam Rubin, you take a look at this Phillies team. They have some young pitchers in the rotation. Nola hasn't been that hot as of late, but they have big expectations for him. You see what Eichhoff, Velasquez, and Eflin as of late have been able to do. Do you see any similarities with the Phillies from, let's say, maybe the Mets a few years ago where they were going through that downtime, but you can see some light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, certainly the Mets never took it down and traded all their core people like the Phillies did. So the Mets didn't try to. Obviously, the way the Phillies did it is probably it's quicker in terms of rebuilding if you really take things down and trade the core pieces. Other than trading R.A. Dickey, the Mets really didn't trade a lot of pieces. They stuck with guys. They re-signed Wright, things like that. So it probably elongated the losing, and the Mets had 6 straight losing seasons before last year. But certainly there are parallels, especially with the young pitching that's coming with the Phillies.
Adam Rubin, ESPN. Adam, thanks so much for coming on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Sure.
There he is, Adam Rubin, joining us on the hotline. 609-919-9200 is the number if you want to call and hang with us.